know how to find shade for them, so. I put you all right here. You all are just over the crest of the low rise. It's just right there behind you. Some of you can see a couple of cast iron tablets right over there. Those are the tablets to Helm's Brigade, the left flank brigade of Breckinridge's division. The rest of Breckinridge's division extends on to the north, Stonewall's brigade, and then Adams beyond. And as we described a few minutes ago, as Breckinridge attacked, the left of his brigade is close enough to the Union line here that it strikes the Union line and comes under fire of the Union line. The brigade actually splits. Half of Helm's brigade will launch reassault against this part of the Union line. In one of the attacks, probably the first, for the first time, they come out into the open ground at the base of the open space there on the east side of the crest, and they come under the artillery fire of the 4th Indiana Battery right down there. You can see the guns. Benjamin Hardin Helm, the brigade commander, is going to be mortally wounded. Helm, of course, is the half-brother-in-law of United States President Abraham Lincoln. Mortally wounded in this fight on the morning of September the 20th. He dies shortly thereafter. But even though this half of the brigade launches 3 assaults against this position, it is not able to make any headway and is repulsed. The rest of the brigade had gone out to the Lafayette Road, but then with Hood's mortal wounding, becomes idle. But Stovall and Adams have driven down the corridor of the Lafayette Road, and they've come out into the north end of the Kelly Field. And as Ed has related, they are now where? Relative to the Union line. They're behind it. But it's only 2 brigades in a division that was only 3,600 strong. And so, how much luck are they going to have? Particularly when Union commanders, from Thomas to Baird to Johnson to Palmer to Reynolds, strip troops from those 4th, 3rd, and 2nd lines and turn them and throw them against Adams and Stovall, stop Adams and Stovall, and then counterattack and drive him back around the end of the line. Where should the weight of Bragg's army have fallen on the morning of September the 20th?
Right here.
Right here. Was there an opportunity? Yes, particularly when illustrated by what happens next. As Breckinridge's men are driven back, as Ed indicated, Gist's division, State Rights Gist division comes forward, and they are going to be repulsed here in a very similar fashion. And as they go back, St. John R. Liddell's division comes forward and does nearly the same thing and experiences nearly the same thing. What might have happened if all 3 of those divisions had attacked at one time? We'll never know for certain. And Gist's own brigade under Peyton Colquitt is perhaps the best example and the most tragic example of just how poor the Confederate leadership is here. Because as they come forward, they are not told that they are going immediately in front of the Federals. They were told they were going in support of another line. They don't put skirmishers out in front. They don't put flankers out to the left and right. And they march out into the open ground right over here, and they get hammered by the flank fire and frontal fire. Peyton Colquitt is killed. There's a shell pyramid for him right over here, and the brigade goes back. Their entire Battle of Chickamauga lasts 20 minutes from the time that they stepped off to the time that they go back. And in those 20 minutes' time, they suffered 36% casualties. 1 man in 3 in 20 minutes' time. What did they not receive from the senior leadership of the Army of Tennessee?
Leadership.
This is where the weight of the Confederate Army should have fallen. But while it did not, it did draw the attention of one critical Union officer, William Stark Rosecrans. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. what we're going to do in just a moment, we're going to walk back over here and back down to the buses. We'll get back on the buses, and we're going to then go on south along Battle Line Road, down to the left, or the right end of this line that's built on the low rise of ground here, intersect with the Lafayette Road. We'll run up to the Visitor Center for our restroom break, and then we'll get out and look at the deciding part of the Battle of Chickamauga. Got anything you want to add here? So, okay. All right. This way. Oh, I'll call our driver the sheriff the rest of the weekend. All right. As Ed said, maps 24 and 25 in the handout. I'm going to use this map for just a little bit of orientation. It shows the 5,300 acres of the Chickamauga battlefield. The Lafayette Road runs down on the battlefield here. And you can see the red and blue blocks on the map that represent, in general, battle positions on September the 20th. What we have done since lunch is we have come back and looked at Breckinridge's attack on the Union left. And you can see the Union line is divided almost in two discrete components or segments. The northern half of it is based off of this low rise of ground that runs north and south parallel to the Lafayette Road and just to the east of the Lafayette Road. As we've already talked about, the Union Army did not have troops to indefinitely extend the line to the north along the crest of the low rise, so they had to bend back or refuse the left end of the line, and that's how we get this curve up here at the top of the line where Baird's division is shown on the map. Because of where Stewart's division had withdrawn to after their attack in this area on September the 19th, Confederates were located along the crest of the low rise in the area here where the tips of my fingers are right now. As a result, the Union line could not extend indefinitely southward along the crest of the low rise. And so here, in the sector that Reynolds' division occupies, the Union line actually has to turn off the crest of the low rise. Now, initially, when Reynolds took up his position in this area, his 2-brigade division was deployed in echelon. The Union line is on the crest of the low rise here, and Reynolds has one of his brigades, George Crook's old brigade, now under the command of John Basil Turchin. He has Turchin's brigade on the crest of the low rise here, and King's brigade is located to the right rear, across the Lafayette Road and at the edge of the woods, looking out across the Poe fields. And so Reynolds is actually deployed kind of like this. Turchin on the east side of the road, King on the west side of the road. And then beyond Reynolds, Brannan's division was located. And just a moment ago, we drove through the sector of Brannan's division. And then the Union line continued on southward through this area where we are now. And then on through, on southward. And right here, the Union line is at the edge of the woods where we are right now. You'll notice this is another reverse slope defense. The crest of the low rise is there in front. They chose this because of the cover and concealment of the woods at this point. Also, if they were up on the crest of the ground there, the Confederates could use the cover and concealment of the woods on the other side of the road to approach at a very short distance and then potentially rush the Union line. And so they've chosen this position back here at the edge of the woods. Now, this is famously the position of Thomas J. Wood's division. But what ended Union line on September the 20th is most important. The left. What did George Thomas say several times when awakened at the Council of War? I will strengthen the left. Strengthen the left. What does Rosecrans say he will do? Strengthen the left with the entire army if necessary. And so, as George Thomas positions his troops here on the left end of the line, where are they going to be shifting troops from? Further to the right. Now, as September the 20th dawned, there were actually, well, I shouldn't even say dawn. As September the 20th began, let's just say just the first minutes after midnight, there were some troops of Reynolds' division right here in this area. But as Thomas positioned Baird and Johnson and Palmer further to the north, and Reynolds' division is positioned as well, Reynolds' troops that were here were drawn off in that direction. Joe Reynolds is concerned about the thin presence of any Union troops here, and about 3 a.m., Joe Reynolds rides out into the large Dyer fields just a short distance in that direction, and he will tell John Brannan, whose division is camped out there in the Dyer fields, to move his division up on line into this position. Now, why this is important is because George Thomas had visited John Brannan's division twice on the evening of the 19th. Once on Thomas's way to Rosecrans command post, and once on the way back. Where does George Thomas think John Brannan's division is? Out there in the Dyer fields. But at 3 a.m., where does John Brannan's division get moved? Right up here to where we are right now. And John Brannan ties in with James Negley's division down here. Well, as Thomas continued to make adjustments to his line to the north, Brannan gets drawn off to the north to stay in contact with Reynolds. That will draw Negley up into this area. And in fact, supporting Marshall right here is the tablet for Negley's division. And as dawn comes, Jefferson Columbus Davis's division has moved up on Negley's right flank. As Ed related earlier, that morning of the 20th, William Stark Rosecrans, responding to a request from George Thomas, had left his headquarters at the Widow Glens before dawn and had ridden along the line, trooped the line from south to north, all the way up there to the left flank to our stop at Slocum's Battery, right after lunch, to the McDonald Farm. And there, Thomas and Rosecrans had talked about better protecting the left flank. And what did Thomas say he wanted? He wanted Negley's division. And where did he want Negley's division? On the left end of the line. But where is Negley at that particular moment? On the line right here. And so, Rosecrans issues orders that some of the troops of the reserve that Thomas Crittenden is commanding back here to the west of us, troops of either Van Cleve's or Wood's division, are to be sent from the reserve up onto the line in this area so James Negley could go up there to the far left of the Union line. Well, Rosecrans rides south, trooping the line. He gets here, and guess what? James Negley is still here. And he says to Negley, why are you not moving towards the left, as Thomas desires and as I have authorized? Negley's response is, I can't move because no one has come to relieve me. Rosecrans reiterates some more orders to relieve Negley, and Wood rides on to the south. Rosecrans rides on to the south. Rosecrans then turns around and rides back to the north. And as he does, who is still here? Negley. And now, as Rosecrans looks out into the big Dyer fields, he sees Thomas J. Wood's division. And he rides to Wood, finds out or asks Wood what he is doing. And Wood is then tasked to come up here and relieve James Negley. And Wood will do that, and Negley's division will start moving towards the left. But by this time, The attack has begun on the left flank. Only Negley's brigade under John Beatty had made it up to the far end of the line. Stanley's and Sirwell's brigades are only now beginning to move in that direction. And Thomas J. Wood's 2 brigades move up here to the line. Except Wood's 2 small brigades cannot fill Negley's entire space, and so Sidney Barnes' brigade of Van Cleve's division is given to Thomas J. Wood, and Sidney Barnes is put onto the line on the left side of Wood's division. And now Thomas J. Wood is famously here. But what time is it? It's after 9:30. Wood is only here for a short time. To his right is Jefferson Columbus Davis's division. Just 2 brigades in 2 lines. The Union line here you have Wood's division, Barnes, Harker, and Buell's brigade, and then Davis's division down here, 2 brigades, one behind the other, and then you have Brannan's division here to the north. This is essentially the Union line south of Thomas's sector, the semicircular line up here, and on the west side of the Lafayette Road. Well, what have I just described over the last couple of minutes? A very fluid situation. How many units have been on this ground between the beginning of the 20th and the beginning of the Confederate attack? Some of Reynolds, then Brannan, then Negley, and now Wood. How many changes are occurring on this line? A lot. And now the Confederate attack begins on the far end of the line.
Time?
What do you mean time?
What time is
that? As depicted on here, after 9:30. So Breckinridge's attack is already beginning up here. Cleburne's attack is beginning. So on this map, well, let's see here. Well, Glenn times this right at 9:30. So it's 9:30 or just a little bit after that. Now the attack begins on the far left of the line. William Stark Rosecrans has moved his headquarters from the Wood of Glens to the Dyer Fields out here. And now courier after courier arrives reporting that threat to the left flank. William Stark Rosecrans has not been taking care of himself over the last week. In particular, he has not been sleeping very much. And when you are deprived of sleep, or you deprive yourself of sleep, what is the first thing that goes? Your mind. Your mind's ability to make judgments in particular. And now, all of a sudden, William Stark Rosecrans is confronted with report after report after report about what? The threat to the left end of the line. Is it likely that that fatigued and mentally exhausted commander might misunderstand something that is being communicated to him? Particularly if that something is really complex, like how are you going to cover Brannan's position? Because as the threat to the left developed, George Thomas is looking for reinforcements in that direction, and he sends a staff officer for John Brannan's division. Where does Thomas think Brannan's division is? In reserve in the Dyer Fields. But where does that staff officer, Sanford Kellogg, find Brannan's division? On the line. And just about to be attacked by Confederates in his front. And when Sanford Kellogg says to Brannan, George Thomas wants you on the left end of the line, Brannan says, I can't move. I will uncover Joe Reynolds on my left. But Kellogg says, General Brannan, Thomas says it is imperative that you move to the left. Brannan says, I cannot move, but let's go see Major General Reynolds. So Kellogg and Brannon ride up to Joe Reynolds. And Kellogg explains to Joe Reynolds that Thomas desires Brannon on the far left of the line. Reynolds says, okay, I will adjust Turchin and King to cover Brannon's position by fire, while Kellogg, you ride to Rosecrans and tell Rosecrans that Brannon is going to the left and that troops are needed in this sector. And that I'm going to cover that sector by fire until those troops can arrive. Kellogg says, okay, and rides off to Rosecrans. It is probably that Kellogg is attempting to explain to Rosecrans that causes the fatigued and mentally exhausted Rosecrans to believe what? That Brannon's division is out of line, that there's a gap or a hole in the line. But who never moved? John Brannon. Because just a few moments later, troops of Claiborne's division and Stewart's division strike Brannon in front. Rosecrans, coming to believe that there is a gap or hole in his line here where Brannon's division was, without thinking it through clearly, without having remembered that he has just ridden the line that morning, that his Chief of Staff, James A. Garfield, is tasked with keeping track of where all Union units are on the battlefield. Rosecrans, without checking on the accuracy of the information that Kellogg has just promised him, turns to a staff officer who does not normally write operations orders, and Mark, if you will now hold up those orders that you have in your hands, so they can see them.
Yes. I can see they're both the same.
Yes. Down here, I'll help you out. There you go.
I'll take, it's got to be this side.
Rosecrans.
Now you see why they lost.
We've got Frank Bond right over here.
Front and center.
Rosecrans dictates that order to Frank Bond. That order is it goes directly from Rosecrans to division command. What level of command is skipped? Corps level command. And in Civil War terminology, this order is contradictory. Close up and support are two different things. Close up means move up to the right or left of the referenced unit. Support means move to a position of aid or assistance, which is generally where? Behind the referenced unit. And what else is wrong with this order? Is there any explanation about why he's being moved? What about who's going to take his position? His skirmishers, the 100th Illinois, men from the Chicagoland area, are engaged with rebels in the woods on the other side of the Lafayette Road. If Wood's going to move, who's going to take his position? Is there any explanation of that? No. That's the order that Rosecrans, in his fatigued and mentally exhausted condition, issued. And the order goes out, and when it arrives at Thomas J. Wood, what should Wood do? Okay?
Clarification.
Ask for clarification. Did he?
No.
Yes. Because standing next to him at that moment is Alexander McCook, the man that he answers to. McCook is in charge of the troops on this sector of the line, and after reading the order, Wood shows it to McCook. McCook reads it and says, "Follow the order." Why does McCook say that?
Because the chucklehead.
He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know what's going on.
No.
Wood's been in trouble before.
No.
He's been in trouble before.
No. What's been happening to the troops in McCook's sector all morning long? They're going to the left. Where are these troops now being told to go? To the left. What end of the line is most important? The left end of the line. And McCook says, follow the order. I'll take care of getting some of Jefferson Columbus Davis's, and Phil Sheridan's men to take your place. Wood turned to the staff officers and said, order my 3 brigades, Barnes, Harker, and Buell, out of line and start them to the north. I don't know where Joe Reynolds is. I'm going to go find Joe Reynolds and find out where we're supposed to go. I will meet you along the way and tell you where we are supposed to go. Wood rides off to the north. The staff goes to Barnes, Harker, and Buell. They start to pull out and move to the north. At the same time, Alexander McCook swung into the saddle, rode down to Jefferson Davis's division, and said, order Martin's brigade in your reserve position up on line. And then McCook rode out to the Dyer Field to the head of Sheridan's division, Bernard Liebel's brigade, and ordered started to explain to Bernard Liebel to move up onto line. But just at that moment, all of a sudden, there was an increase in firing in the woods just to the east of this position. And then there was the rebel yell raised by about 3,000 throats. And then the fire increased even more. And before McCook could get to get Martin fully online, and before Wood is even fully out of position, and before Liebel can come this way, somebody else is going to fill this position. It's all these guys in red on the map here. Longstreet. Yep. James Longstreet. What's gone wrong here for the Union Army? Under the pressure of the threat to the left, a fatigued and mentally exhausted Commander William Stark Rosecrans has not followed his normal headquarters procedures, and now what has he just created in his line?
Huge gap.
Gap for a hole. And by pure dumb luck, that happens to be directly opposite what? The power punch of the Confederate Army.
About how much ground is that?
This gap was about 700 yards.
700?
700 yards. Yeah, but it was closing very rapidly because Martin's brigade is coming up on the line. 2 regiments are on line. The other 2 are still coming up on line, so it was getting smaller.
Where's Wilder?
Wilder is off this map down here he's on the extreme southwest of the Union line.
So about how many men are going to push through that gap?
For the Confederates, well, James Longstreet has been given command initially of 5 divisions. But in the early morning hours, just after dawn, a 6th division arrives. Kershaw's and Humphrey's brigades of McLaw's division, and so he will then have 6 divisions on the field. 23,000 soldiers. Now, James Longstreet is famous here at Chickamauga for having formed what? A column of troops, which you see right here. But that is not what he ordered. James Longstreet had heard from Bragg that the desired formation was what? All divisions on line, side by side to one another. And when that morning of the 20th, James Longstreet rode out to communicate for the first time with most of the troops he's going to command this day, he tells his division commanders, Stewart and Johnson and Hindman and Law, Van Preston, that he wants the troops to be formed with 2 brigades up and 1 brigade back. And he needs to make room on that front line to get Law's division, Perry, Robertson, and Benning's brigades on the front line. And so he tells Stewart to slide over to the right. Now, we've already heard this. Remember?
Yeah.
No. Right a few minutes ago, right after lunch, they slide over in front of Deschler. This is where Longstreet intrudes upon Polk's wing. He crosses the wing boundary. into Polk's right wing. And when Stuart slid to the north, Bushrod Johnson did exactly as he had been told earlier. Maintain connection between your right and Stuart's left. And so, when Stuart slid right, Johnson slid right. And guess what? No gap ever opened in the front line for Long. And so Longstreet had to throw up his hands and said, okay, I can't get Law on the front line, and so I'll have a front line of Stuart, Johnson, and Hindman. I'll keep Preston in reserve, and I'll put Law immediately behind Johnson. And then a few minutes later, Kershaw arrived with Kershaw's and Humphrey's brigade. And Longstreet says, you fall in behind Law. This column was not something that he originally set out to do. It is the result of the crowded situation on the battlefield. So Longstreet has 23,000 men. He's going to keep the 5,000 men of Preston's division in reserve. And so he intends to then attack with the other 5 divisions, 18,000 men. And he intended to send them all forward at one time. But a frustrated Braxton Bragg is going to send Stuart's division forward under an order directly from Bragg to Stuart through Major Pollock V. Lee, who we heard about earlier. And so, when Longstreet, a little before 11, learns that Pollock V. Lee is riding in his command, telling officers to attack immediately, Longstreet, not wanting to see the rest of his formation broken up in that piecemeal fashion, turns to his staff and says, order the remaining 4 divisions, Johnson, Law, Kershaw, and Hindman, order them forward at this time. And a little after 11, these 15,000 soldiers will go forward. The power punch, of course, is the 11,000 men in the 3 divisions of Bushrod Johnson in 2 lines, Law in 2 lines, and Kershaw in 1 line on a front of about 700 yards. Hindman is to the south of that, in that direction, 3 brigades, 2 up and 1 back. And a little after 11, the lead line will jump off, move forward, giving the rebel yell. After about 200 to 300 yards have opened between them and the second line moved forward. And after about 200 to 300 yards of space has opened, then the third line moves forward. And then the 4th line, and then the 5th line. And by pure dumb luck, what does Bushrod Johnson's lead line find when they come out of the woods directly east of where we are? There's a hole or gap in the line. Who is surprised as anybody else? They run over the skirmishers in 100th Illinois, and they come out of the woods, crossing the Lafayette Road, and they pour through this gap in the line. And the southern half of the Union line is going to begin to crumple under the weight of this assault. Well, we are, let me go back one map here. Here is Wood's division, Barnes, Harker, and Buell's brigade. Okay, no, wait a minute. Here's the Brotherton Cabot. So we are right there. The left end of the gap is up here in the woods. There's a cast iron tablet up here for Harker's brigade. Buell's brigade, Marshall's doing a really good job of holding commemorative features down today. Marshall's now indicating for us the commemorative feature for the 100th Illinois. Those Chicagoland boys, and there are the tablets for Buell's brigade right there. So we are kind of on the right of Harker and the left of Buell's brigade right here.
Marshall doesn't want to blow away.
Okay.
Buell's line extended past the end of the Brotherton field.
Yes, yep, slightly to the side.
Artillery reaction?
They have a little bit of artillery along the line, but of course it's going to be pulled out and moved to the north. Confederate artillery is going to try to support, but there's nothing for them to shoot at. And so they limber up and move on.
What happened to the artillery, Churchin, Hazen, and King in front of them that was supposed to cover the gap? Did they get moved? Or?
No, Brannan's division is never moves, and so they are going to be attacked by Stewart and Sam Wood, Claiborne, and also a little bit of Deschler. So they're being attacked.
So they're busy on their own.
They're busy on their own.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're not able to react to this passage of troops to their side. I'll create the gap again. This is where the Battle of Chickamauga turns. Up to this point, who's winning this battle pretty clearly? The Union Army is. But now, as a result of this poor decision-making by a fatigued and mentally exhausted commander, what's happening to the Union line? It's going to crumble. Questions or observations?
What happened to the southern bunch of
These guys?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll deal with them at our next stop.
Okay.
What we're going to do in just a moment, after we hear from Colonel Lars, is we're going to drive westward through the gap in the Union line, and then we're going to loop around. We're going to go up on the hill here, and we'll talk about the collapse of the southern half of the Union line.
Now, did Rosecrans have any reconnaissance that told him that the Southerners were stringing out like that?
No.
No.
You have no idea.
Sure would have helped.
Well, he knew there were Confederates in front of him, but not in the density that
Yeah, but I mean, nor the length, because otherwise he could have concentrated his and forced
well,
tougher attack.
he's on the defensive, and he does not know this level of detail about the Confederate position. In fact, there has been some discussion in Rosecrans' command group back here about bending the entire right of the Union line back.
I mean, he's doing a nice job of sidling to the left, but he's not. He's still strung out.
Well, is he doing a good job of moving troops to the left? Does Thomas not have enough men up here?
Well, yeah.
What the real problem is, having not slept much in the last week, he misprocesses this information. He doesn't check on the accuracy of it, and it's going to result in the creation of this hole.
So Negley never moves.
No. I mean,
Brandt,
right.
And then
Right.
Reynolds is still up here, and he's not moving either.
Right.
I mean,
Brannan can't move because he's being
stuck.
attacked.
He's
Right.
stuck
Yeah.
right there at the beginning.
Question, why do you call it dumb a lot?
Well, because no Confederate knew there was a gap in the line.
But they were charging, right?
Well, but they were going to attack here regardless of what the Union position was.
So it was luck, good luck.
Well, I say dumb because there are a lot of James Longstreet fans out there who want to have James Longstreet standing over there behind that big pine tree, peeking around the tree, seeing Wood pull out and turning and saying, "Come on, boys, we got him now." They want to have Longstreet very purposefully attacking here just at that moment that Rosecrans makes a gap in his line, makes a mistake. But no Confederate knew anything at all about this gap in the line opening because the skirmishers of the 100th Illinois have pushed the Confederate skirmishers well back into the woods on the other side of the road, so much so that Confederates along that line, along Longstreet's front line here, will report that just before they were ordered forward, they were attacked by the Union Army. And Confederate artillery is firing at the skirmishers of the 100th Illinois.
Rosecrans was kind of set up into making that bad decision, though, I think.
Well, why?
Well, but like you said, Thomas.
Well, Thomas
is getting greedy, and
Yep.
and he gets this misinformation, and like you said,
But he also has not taken care of himself, so he can think clearly.
But you've got reserves here.
No, not anymore.
Yeah, but when the whole thing started, before it started, why didn't he move these guys up here and then move these guys down? I mean, that would be the simple solution.
Well, but the time on that map is what?
time.
9 o'clock.
Okay. Van Cleve's three brigades have been farmed out to 3 different places and are on the line. Wood is now in the line.
But move these, okay, so here's 8 o'clock. Move these guys north, and then...
Well, but they're not Thomas's men. Thomas wanted his own men.
Which was Brandon and Nick.
Right. So, you know, Thomas has gotten off pretty clean.
because
in
he
this,
stood.
but Thomas is a pretty big culprit in this.
He's overestimated what he needed.
Why doesn't Thomas say, "I'll take Van Cleve" or "I'll take Wood from the reserve"?
Yeah.
But what does Thomas say? I want who? I want Negley.
Yeah.
And that results in having to replace Negley to move him up there. So,
Remember, if he was keeping closer top, and Negley had been sharing information, Negley has a very bad case of diarrhea.
Yeah.
Negley does not have a good record as a combat leader. It would be, nor does Van Cleve. Whether you're looking at Stones River or here, Van Cleve is a weak link. You should have known, everybody should have known that Van Cleve's men don't do well here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the previous day. They break when they're attacked by only about 3,200 men.
What happened to the Illinois guys on the other side of the road?
well, a lot of them get captured. The entire regiment is not out there, only part of it, but the colonel is out there. As the Confederates advance, they fall back. They see the buildings of the Brotherton farmstead. They see the paling fences around the Brotherton farmstead. They think, oh, we can fight from behind this cover. They don't realize the size of this attacking Confederate force. And so they try to rally in the buildings of the Brotherton farmstead. And they will indeed stop the skirmishers right in their front. But skirmisher Confederates pass to their north and pass to their south. And most of the men of the 100th Illinois on the skirmish line out there wind up getting captured, including Colonel Francis Bartleson, who is severely wounded and is captured in the Brotherton house. They didn't realize how mammoth this Confederate attack was. Now, it turns out to be some real good fortune for some of these Confederates, because in Fulton's brigade, there are a number of freshly minted second lieutenants who have not yet had an opportunity to buy out of their own pockets, as required, the proper symbols of authority. They don't have a waist belt, a sword, and a pistol yet. But guess what they capture amongst the men of the 100th Illinois? A number of company-grade officers who are wearing the proper symbols of authority, a waist belt, sword, and pistol. And when, a few minutes later, Fulton's brigade marches further to the west, guess what those brand new, freshly minted second lieutenants are carrying? The proper symbols of authority as booty captured on the battlefield. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go westward through this gap or hole in the line.
We'll be going right with the Confederate advance until they should start turning north. We're going to find out the Confederates are going to have bad luck. The man that's quartering this is going to get wounded, and Longstreet is going to halt for a convivial lunch, in which we're going to eat some sweet potatoes, and for about 2 hours, Longstreet at a crucial moment where he could have followed up is going to be a non-player.
And we'll go through the line. We'll turn to the south. We're going to loop around and go up onto a wooded hill where we can look out over where much of the collapse of the Union right occurs.
Out to get to this position, to make it easy, we can see it. See the road alignment about 300, 400 yards in front of us as we look across the dire field. And here's where we're standing. We're going to see the Confederates first out of the ground as they come to their advance like this. They're going to burst out of the field, and here we're our Libel's brigade, and coming up here is going to be Lytle's brigade. Libel has been a brigade commander ever since the Battle of Blue Ridge, and he will succeed to brigade commander at Stones River. Sheridan is a good man at getting brigade commanders killed or wounded. So we're up here now. Libel's role when he arrives here is to advance from this position where we are now and strike the Confederates who are storming through coming into view in the area north of that monument, north of those two guns, extending northward up to the intersection where we can stop that stop sign. That's where you're going to see the first of the Confederates coming through that area there. And of course, we're going to, Sheridan's task here is to stop that advance. He's going to use Libel first, and their Libel will go up and try to backstop Davis's command. Davis is the division commander. He's up there with Carlin, and Martin is commanding the people that have been commanded the previous day by the late lamented Hans Haig. That's the Wisconsin. So Libel is moving up here and coming at us now. We have talked about and it's been pointed out to us by Jim immediately on Johnson's left is a division commanded by that Batty Rooster, Thomas Carmichael Heineman. And here, of course, is he, as he comes out of the woods, and he is going to be, this is a brigade commanded by Zach Days, who is a cotton merchant from Mobile. And we can see them coming out here into the Dyer field here as they're moving in here, and they're going to be opposed by Davis with his two brigades. Libel moving up to tangle with them and coming up here, and we'll soon be turning it over to our man's favorite brigade. There is John Taylor Wilder's brigade. Remember all the pain and suffering he gave those Confederate forces at dusk on the 19th, building up to the pain and suffering he'd given them at Alexander's Bridge on the evening of the 18th. And they're going to punish Manigault's brigade with even more savagely than they had punished the people we met before lunch. And they're going to, kind of because it seems pitiful the way Wilder's men are going to mow down these brigades that have two regiments of South Carolinians. And eventually they will fall back, but then enter on the thing that's very obvious. I do not like Charles Dana. Charles Dana will go to Wilder after he is repulsed and chewed up Manigault's brigade. He says, I'm more valuable. In essence, he's saying, I'm more valuable than any person on this battlefield. I am the Secretary of War, and I want you to give me your entire brigade. I want you to escort me into Chattanooga. What an ass. Wilder will say, I'll find a detachment of men to escort you into McFarland's Gap. So I just want to take that shot here. Here's your chance we're going to try to stop Heineman's advance here with Libel and Carlin and Martin, and Lytle will come up, and the Confederates will be gaining down here, but also what the Union are going to be doing, they're going to be pulling back in this direction toward the high ground there. The Confederates are going to have trouble making the swing from moving to the east to move north, and the Federals are going to be allowed to establish a favorable position. Along this ridge, later, we will have a number of Union cannons along the ridge to the west of that rise going up to the South Carolina Monument is. And but in the end, Sheridan will be unsuccessful, and he will have to join in the retreat toward McFarland's Gap. But Longstreet is now beginning. He's got his lucky or what? He's got the breakthrough. But now, what is he going to do? He is leaving Hood to quarterback and run the attack. Hood is going to get disabled and carried from the field. And what is Longstreet going to do? He's going to halt for a leisurely brunch. Right there. His leisurely brunch. Eating as the people who don't like him well, sweet potatoes. And for practical purposes, for 2 critical hours, the Confederates will have no one running to exploit this success. I'll turn it over to my friend here, a longtime colleague, Jim, and let him finish it up.
This gives you a great view of just the collapse of the Union right on the field, and you can imagine Rosecrans is at his command post just back here when he makes that critical decision. Imagine the view that he had as Confederates pour out of the woods and into these fields. By one account, he was said to have said, "Gentlemen, if you care to live any longer, I would leave this place." By another account, he was seen to cross himself. Rosecrans, and I think this is the final testament of just how fatigued and mentally exhausted he is, the command group is here. He orders it to move off in this direction to some other knoll, but as he does, he remembers that Sheridan's division is down here to the south, and without telling anyone in the command group, he turns around and rides southward and away from the command group. And in fact, the command group is going to break up, and it is in the breakup of the command group that Horace Porter will do the activity down in this area that later will result in him being awarded the Medal of Honor. Rosecrans rides to Sheridan's division, rides up onto this hill. Liebold's brigade has been, as Ed related, repulsed, and Sheridan now attempts to deploy Lytle's brigade here on this hill, and Walworth's, formerly Bradley's brigade, is extending on off to the southwest down here. They will stop the Confederates in their front for a time, but when Confederates pass them on both the left and right, and repeated assaults strike them in front, Sheridan's division is going to collapse. And in the collapse of Sheridan's division, Rosecrans will be caught up and swept from the field, essentially by himself. And as we heard last night from Ed, eventually, as Rosecrans rides through the hills of Missionary Ridge, he will find Garfield. Garfield riding alone as well. Garfield, after realizing that the boss was gone, Garfield will ride away from the command group as well, trying to catch up with Rosecrans. Basically, the command group of the Army of the Cumberland fragments in the aftermath of this. Most of them will make it back towards Chattanooga. But over about 60 minutes' time, beginning a little after 11, the entire southern half of the Union line on the battlefield crumples under the weight of this Confederate assault and this ill-considered command of Rosecrans. Only the troops really of Brannan's division and some of Wood's are going to conduct a fighting withdrawal off to the northwest and into this wooded hill mass, where they will find a place to make a stand. And that will, in just a few minutes, be our last stand on the battlefield as well. Now, many of you all will remember from previous visits here that on the top of this rise, and we'll walk quickly by it as we go out, is the site of the shell pyramid for William Haynes Lytle. And that pyramid had long ago been reduced to a single layer of cannonballs, but we have initiated a project with the Friends of Chickamauga Chattanooga National Military Park, the Lytle Camp of the Sons of Union Veterans in Cincinnati, and others to restore the Lytle Shell Pyramid. After many years of not ordering 8-inch naval shells, the United States government is again ordering 8-inch naval shells. And we will, hopefully later this year or very early next year, begin construction of the Lytle Pyramid to get it back to its proper form. If you are desirous of purchasing a cannonball, I've got a flyer here where you can send your money. We need 323 to restore the monuments.
Where are they going to cast them for you?
We actually had a pattern made a couple of years ago, and so they will probably be cast right here in Chattanooga at Eureka Foundry.
Then what did we do? We advanced down off that first high knoll. And then we find we have to charge up this second hill. So you can see either we're a bunch of wimps or something has happened to our energy in the last 12 years.
I talked too long at the other places, is what I told the folks on my bus. So they didn't have time we didn't have time to take the Snodgrass Hill Fitness and Assault Wall.
So did they pay you a reward?
No. They did cheer, however. And I told them that even with my military groups, I can't tell them ahead of time what it is we're going to do. I can't tell them that we're going to walk up one hill and through a ravine and up another taller hill. Because if they found out that the alternative was to drive up here, what would they vote for? To drive.
You didn't give us a vote.
Well, one time I had Marine Corps training and indoctrination out. And the officer in charge was in February. So if they came in loafers, they got off on all the stops in loafers. They climbed every hill. And then I had been out there one time with some Marines doing a staff ride in 15-car van. And they were not getting out. And I told him about it, and he said, you should have got the license plates number. Because I would have taken personal action, and they would have had to make up that day.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to say it, the modern military has wimps in it today.
At least standing here, you can tell that this wooded hill mass rises sharply and steeply above the general lay of the land. And if we indeed had taken the time to take the Snodgrass Hill Fitness and Assault Walk, those who survived would have reached the top of the hill between those two monuments over there. And generally what I hear first from those groups above the huffing and puffing is they, having seen the road, say, you mean we could have driven but you would have had a real appreciation of just how steeply this hill rises above the general lay of the land. And it is the steepness of this hill and the windedness of the Union troops fleeing into this wooded hill mass that is a major factor in why Union troops make a stand on this hill. Yes, there are a few units up here largely intact already, like Sirwell's brigade draped over the open spur out there to the east of the Snodgrass farmstead. Bridges, Illinois Battery, Smith's Battery I, 4th U.S. Artillery. But all of a sudden now, with the collapse of the right half of the Union line on the battlefield, Union troops are fleeing the field to the west, northwest, and those who are moving more northwardly move into this wooded hill mass, and there are hundreds of Union soldiers from, in particular, Brannan's division, Cruxton's and Connell's brigade. They fled into this wooded hill mass. They reach the top of the hill, and they stop to catch their breath. But some of them, while they are stopping to catch their breath, look around and they notice we can make a stand here. And they start to turn to their other comrades and they say, "You've got a flag, wave the flag. You've got a bugle." Well, you're not very good bugling.
How do you know?
You fall in, let's form up here. We can make a stand. And what really happens here is that from the lower levels of leadership, not necessarily officers, certainly not senior people like Thomas, but lower graded leaders, some natural leaders emerge, and a new line begins to be cobbled together on this wooded hill mass. If that line begins out on the open spur to the east of the Snodgrass farmstead, runs up to the buildings of the farmstead, runs up along where we are right now, around the crest of this little knoll, through the saddle there where you see the monument to the 87th Indiana, up over the top of the next hill, the highest in the complex, and then into the woods on the other side. From Sirwell's brigade on the open spur out here, the 21st Ohio, armed with the Colt revolving rifle, that 5-shot 56 caliber weapon, they are loaned to Brannan to anchor the initial right flank of the line on Snodgrass Hill. The initial rallied line on Snodgrass Hill is about 1/2 mile in length, beginning on that open spur, running up along where we are, and then into the woods just to the west of us. That line faces basically south and just a little bit east of south. And it is able to get formed by 1 o'clock when the first of the Confederates, pursuing these withdrawing Federals, come up from the south. It is Kershaw's brigade of South Carolina, uniformed completely in product of the Richmond clothing depot, uniforms made out of English imported cloth, blue-gray English Army cloth jackets, and light blue pants. From a distance, in the dust and smoke, they even look like Union soldiers. And in fact, they have been mistaken for Union soldiers a couple of times already on the battlefield. But they come charging up from the south. They charge up this slope. They come through the low ground here, go out against the open spur. Some turn and charge right up this slope here, but they are stopped by the Union troops up here. 3 times the South Carolinians attack. 3 times they are sent back. Kershaw's attack will draw the attention of Bushrod Johnson's division. It will come up from the south, and Johnson begins to approach the right end of the Union line, initially on Snodgrass Hill. But fortunately for George Thomas, at that moment, the last available Union troops in the area arrive. 2 brigades of Gordon Granger's Reserve Corps, Whitaker's and Mitchell's brigades of Stedman's division arrive, and they extend the line further to the west, another 1/2 mile. They have marched to the sound of the guns, under the discretionary orders that Rosecrans had given Granger. And Granger has brought them southward, and they arrive now about 2 o'clock at a critical time and extend the Union line westward. And now the Union line on Snodgrass Hill is 1 mile in length from its eastern end just out to the east of the Snodgrass farm, out into the woods to the west of us. And throughout the afternoon, this line repulses repeated Confederate assaults. Depending upon how you count, there are as many as 25 individual Confederate assaults. After Kershaw's men are repulsed 3 times on this ground here, in the afternoon, Preston's division comes forward, and Archibald Gracie's brigade of Alabamans and Tennesseans charge up this hill 3 times. Only once do they ever reach the crest here. Each time, though, they are thrown back down on this hill. Throughout the afternoon, this rallied body of Union troops, now with George Thomas as the senior Union officer left on the field, will withstand these repeated assaults. George Thomas, even before James Garfield returns with the order from Rosecrans to withdraw the remains of the army back towards Chattanooga, Thomas had recognized that he cannot stay here indefinitely, because this rallied line is unconnected by anything more than a line of skirmishers between here and the troops around the Kelly Field. Thomas, in late afternoon, ordered a phase withdrawal. He orders first one brigade and then another to drop back off of this line and back through McFarland's Gap and Missionary Ridge and back towards Chattanooga. And throughout those last couple of hours of daylight, first one Union brigade and then another will drop back from this position and pass northwestward off of the battlefield. During that time, fortunately, the Confederates only attack where there are still Union troops on the battlefield. As darkness approaches, the Confederates finally achieve the coordination, cooperation, synchronization they have needed all along. Just before dark, from a number of impetuses, the Confederates are suddenly going to go forward en masse. And as Polk's people charge forward one more time around the Kelly Field, as Longstreet's people charge up the slope of Snodgrass Hill one more time, they find the Union positions largely unoccupied. And as darkness settles on the battlefield, Confederate soldiers occupy the Union positions. Only a few Union units, as Ed related, are not going to get off of the field. They did not get the orders proper to withdraw, and they will be captured. But as darkness settled on the battlefield, the Confederates own the ground. They occupy the Union position. They cheer loudly for a time after dark, but has Bragg really won a victory here? Where is the Union Army withdrawn to? Both armies are shattered by this experience. Rosecrans has engaged 58,000 soldiers. 16,000 of them have become casualties. Braxton Bragg has engaged 66,000 men. 18,000 of them have become casualties. 34,000 casualties from this one battle. About 4,000 men are dead outright on the field at the end of the fight. 25,000 wounded soldiers. Another 2,000 to 4,000 of the wounded are going to die from the effects of their injuries in the coming days, weeks, and months after the battle. What Bragg must do now is pursue, exploit, follow up. But what is it going to take to do that? And we'll pick that story up this evening and tomorrow as we study the campaign on from this point.
All of the Confederate attacks at the hill are totally uncoordinated.
Now, the majority of the Confederate attacks against this position are piecemeal, uncoordinated, brigade-sized assaults.
So wasn't anybody in charge of what was going on?
No, there is not anybody in charge.
That's when Longstreet eating lunch?
Longstreet's eating lunch. Hood is wounded. Thomas Carmichael Hyman is stunned by the concussion of an exploding artillery projectile. There's just nobody coordinating the action of the 17 individual brigades.